On January 6th, 2025, just a couple of weeks ago, OpenMandriva Linux, a pretty long-standing Linux distribution, became publicly known as being non-woke, right? They became known around the internet as being a non-woke open source project. Now, here's the question. What happens after that? This was just about 2 weeks ago. What has the result been? Because this is an interesting thing. We see many Linux, open source projects, web browsers, all sorts of things become very political or very anti-political. But what result do those actions, those declarations of having a political or non-political allegiance or activity, what do those actions have on the project? How do those impact the project? Let's look at what we know so far, because I think the results are pretty interesting and they look really good for OpenMandriva declaring themselves as non-woke. Now, a little bit of background here. OpenMandriva has been around in one incarnation or another for quite some time, for a number of years now. They are based on the old granddaddy Linux distribution, Mandrake Linux, which was many years back. I'm trying to think, like about 17,000 years ago, Mandrake Linux was known as kind of one of the easy to use Linux distributions. They were one of the early ones to have a cool live CD, and they were easy to configure, and it was a very cool Linux distribution. Well, I openly, unrelated to Mandrake Linux, but earlier in December, I openly came out and I said, you know what? Where are all the non-woke operating systems? There's so many woke operating systems out there. Where's the non-woke ones, right? And when I say woke, I'm not talking about, someone involved in the project has a leftist political ideology. What I really mean was that the project itself, the people running it and whatnot, enforced very specific political ideologies that you would define as being woke. Great examples would be openSUSE or Elementary or Asahi, various Linux distributions out there that made statements where they said if you don't have a leftist political ideology, that you're not welcome. Like, you're not allowed to contribute. They don't want you using their software. Like, they were really hardcore, right? They were alienating and exclusionary of other people. And so I was like, where are all the non-woke systems, Linux or otherwise? Where are they? And then the president of OpenMandriva, he tossed me an email, and it was one of my favorite emails that I've gotten in the last year. And he said, I'm just going to read a few sentences of it. We are, of course, a Linux-based project. So we certainly use some code from the woke crowd, but in our own project, we are pretty much the opposite. We don't do DEI or DIE as we prefer to call it. That's from the OpenMandriva Association president and kind of the head honcho, Bernard of OpenMandriva. And he went on to talk about it in some detail, and I was like, wow, OpenMandriva is a non-woke Linux distribution. You just don't hear that very much, right? You don't see that. You see so many distributions that are super woke, but not non-woke, right? And he wasn't pushing a political agenda. He was just simply saying he's not going to be woke, right? And that's pretty amazing. So what result does that have? So I published the video on January 6th, and then followed it up with a little short review of it. And I was curious, what result did that have? Now, measuring Linux anything is hard, especially market share. If you want to say, okay, how many users does Ubuntu Linux have? They don't know. Ubuntu Linux doesn't know. Ask Debian, Fedora, any of them. How many users do you have right now? Gosh. And now various open source projects will have some ways of kind of measuring success of a distribution, certain types of downloads, hits to various repositories, but they tend to be not overly consistent or reliable. They don't give any consistent numbers. And what to make it even more difficult, almost all of the Linux distributions out there change the method or some aspect of how they record those usage metrics constantly. So measuring it from one year to the next is almost impossible. So how do you measure Linux market share, even of a singular Linux system? It's really tricky. So we've got to put that to the side for a moment. What can we measure? What metrics are out there that can show us how a Linux distribution or any sort of project has changed over a given period of time? Well, one of the things we can do is just search trends, right? So this is just Google Trends. I'm going to look at right now. If you can see the video, you can see it up on your screen. So if you go to trends.google.com, you can see search trends over time for any search term you want. So if you plug in OpenMandriva, look at it from the worldwide point of view, so searches all across the globe, and look at it over the last 5 years, you start to see something pretty interesting. Now, how Google search trends works, it doesn't set a specific number by saying 75 people on this day searched for this particular term. Now, what it really does is it sets a percentage of interest. So it says over this period of time, the top day, the day with the most searches for that term, is your 100% day, right? That's the 100%, that's the top of your graph. And the day with the least number of searches for your term, that's your 0 day. That's the bottom of your graph. And everything else is a percentage of it in between. And really what that lets you track is the change to interest of that search term over time. How often is it getting searched for? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing, etc.? And what you quickly start to notice, no matter what locale or time frame you look at with OpenMandriva, is it stays fairly consistent, right? There's regular searches happening, and while there are spikes, usually if you look at the dates related to individual releases of OpenMandriva, each one of those spikes is a release that has a bunch of articles written about that particular release of OpenMandriva. But then you look all the way down there at the end at January 6th and 7th, and shwoink, it shoots through the roof, sending all previous spikes, all previous biggest days ever that would normally be at the 100 line, all the way down to like 25. Or lower in a lot of cases. I mean, it puts it all to shame. Now, that's not the Lunduke Journal effect. I mean, sure, I'd love to say, the Lunduke Journal is so popular that we just made it shoot through the roof. What that really is interest in people searching for OpenMandriva because the story resonated with them. The idea that OpenMandriva was a non-woke Linux distribution was intriguing. It required people, it prompted them to search more through the roof. Now, there's nothing else that happened right then. On that particular day, that specific, if you dial it in to that specific date range, that is specifically when this story broke, that OpenMandriva was non-woke. That's what did this. And it shows, you can see it kind of trail off, but what's happened now is it's kind of baselined out at a new baseline. The new baseline is roughly the same as the old peaks. So what used to be the old spikes of, they have a new release and now it's hitting 100, that's now the baseline. Now, we'll see how that trends over time. I mean, that could continue to go down over time. Over the last few days, it looks like that's kind of plateaued out there. But my guess is we'll see some up and down continue. But it appears to be that a new baseline has been set that's a bit higher. So we've got some really significant change in just general overall interest. If you want to dial it in and say, okay, well, how is OpenMandriva's popularity just in the United States over the last year, it's even more dramatic. Because now, if you listen to the audio podcast, you're kind of missing out. The video of this, the picture, the chart here, basically shows that on January 6th, it went from nothing to 100, and it rendered the entirety of the last year as a 0 baseline or close to it, 1, 2, 3. and now we're up at 0. And it's assuming that it's going to drop back down. It has a little dotted line there. It says where it's assuming it's going to go based on what information Google has in its search trends so far and the search history. But that doesn't actually seem to be fully what's happening. What seems to be happening is that it's plateauing at about the 25% of the peak line, which means that new interest in the United States of the search term OpenMandriva is now just almost infinitely larger than what it was just two weeks ago. And again, that's not the Lunduke Journal effect. That's the non-woke effect. It's insane. Other things that we can measure here. If you go to the OpenMandriva forum, what's nice about the OpenMandriva forum is that they publish all their numbers. So you can see their numbers over time of user registrations, posts, people clicking the like button, all that sort of stuff. And you can really look at it. And you see, when you go there right now, an absolute flood of new people who are joining the OpenMandriva forum to ask questions about him. And some of them just to say, hey, I came here because I saw the thing on the Lunduke Journal, and now I'm checking it out. And yeah, now it's my primary distribution. This is awesome, right? You're seeing a ton of that. And you're seeing actually people, contributors to the OpenMandriva project, who regularly would greet new users who trickle in as time goes on, saying, quote, okay, I'm having trouble keeping up with my usual welcome to all new users. What a wonderful problem. And I've been hearing about that in their chat forum, in their chat rooms and everything, about how they're just getting bombarded with new people coming in, right? And again, that's not the Lunduke Journal effect. The Lunduke Journal has mentioned a lot of projects, but those projects didn't experience this, right? The Lunduke Journal has mentioned a whole lot of projects that are woke. They don't have this experience. In fact, they have the opposite experience. I'm going to show you that in a second. But what we're seeing here is a non-woke project, and the skyrocketing interest, user share, and new user signups is through the roof. In fact, here's a hard breakdown on the numbers from the OpenMandriva forum. If you go to, what's the website here? Forum.openmandriva.org. So this forum, in its current incarnation, right, the current installation, it has existed for 10 years, since the year 2015. Since they became publicly known as non-woke less than 2 weeks ago, or roughly 2 weeks ago, roughly 23% of all the user accounts to exist on their forum were created in those 2 weeks. And again, they've existed for 10 years on this forum. And in the last 2 weeks, 23%, over almost a quarter of all of the user accounts that exist, period, have been created. 17% of all posts from all time were created in the last 2 weeks. And again, they've existed for 10 years. This is crazy. And the most active forum post of all time is quote, came here from Lunduke. It just has hundreds of people hopping in there saying, yeah, I came here because Lunduke said it was non-woke and this is awesome. Now this is my new main distribution. And people are happy about it. I'm hearing from people constantly every day that they're happy to be using it. Now, measuring full, real, hard numbers is difficult. Like I say with all Linux projects, it really, really is. And this comes from someone. I used to sit on the board of directors of a Linux distribution, and measuring is hard. Some Linux distributions try to get around that with various types of telemetry, which I don't love. Different distributions and projects come up with different ideas of how to measure their market share, downloads of ISOs, IP connections to software update repositories, and on and on and on. But changes in configurations, changes in how the stats are collected can throw things off wildly. I mean, really wildly, and it's just really hard to get those numbers. And with OpenMandriva, it's even harder than most, because OpenMandriva has many, many different mirrors all over the place where you can grab a wide multitude of different builds of OpenMandriva. So measuring the download stats for OpenMandriva is it's just a nightmare. And I asked the OpenMandriva dev teams about it, and they were like, "Hey," and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically what I got back was, "Look, we've been focused on building this, not on measuring its success. We're building it because we want it. We want OpenMandriva, so we're building it. We weren't really worried about how many people were using it. We're not measuring those stats. We're just building something great," and I kind of like that. I mean, I like the attitude, right? Now, me personally, I want those numbers. I want those stats. But OpenMandriva isn't the only Linux distribution that makes it difficult to get those stats. Some are even harder than OpenMandriva, but it's difficult. But what we are seeing, and this very, very clear, is one, the interest of people searching for this distribution is skyrocketing. Not a little bigger, not 20% bigger, not even 100, 200, 400% bigger, but thousands and thousands of percentage increase. It is just through the roof. And again, that's not the Lunduke Journal effect. It is being non-woke. And when you look at the forum, you are seeing an absolute explosion in interested new users and people who are actively using the distro that were not a few weeks ago. I mean, massive, massive, massive growth. And this is beautiful to see. And I want to compare this right now, because when we're talking about woke versus non-woke distributions, it's important to actually have something to compare against. Because what if every Linux distribution was simply experiencing this right now, right? I mean, that could be possible, but it's not. Let's dial in and look at openSUSE. Let's look at openSUSE, and the reason we're going to look at openSUSE right now is twofold. The first is because I used to sit on the board of directors of openSUSE. Here's a picture of me from, a decade ago. I don't know, a long time ago. There I am with absolutely no facial hair. It's just truly disappointing. I'm just sitting there without any facial hair at all. But there I am at some conference talking about at openSUSE, and I'm one of the elected board members. In fact, in this picture, I'm the only one who's an elected board member. And the second reason, so I know a lot about it. I know how they count things. I know how they operate. I can speak about it knowledgeably. I have I'm not affiliated with them anymore. But the second reason we're going to talk about openSUSE is that they have been decidedly very woke, right? They're leaning into it. So I think it's fair to say that OpenMandriva is at this point, and this is a new thing as of January 6th, 2025. But as of now, they're kind of the poster child for non-woke Linux-based operating system, right? They're kind of the most known one in that way. And openSUSE, I don't know if I'd say it's the most woke Linux distribution, but they certainly seem to want it to be, right? They've been pushing very, very hard to make it the most woke. And so because of that, I think it's fair to look at what the results are. Over the last couple of years, let's say the last year to 2 years specifically, the openSUSE project, which is a part run and kind of half run by SUSE Corporation, has been actively banning anyone who was considered to be conservative politically, right? So if you came out and you declared that you didn't personally want to wave the trans rights flag, you were banned from the openSUSE project, right? If you said, I don't feel like waving the trans flag, you were kicked out. You were stripped of your openSUSE membership. You were no longer allowed to vote in openSUSE board member elections. You were banned from participating in their email mailing lists, and on and on and on, right? And so they've been doing this for quite some time, and it's resulted in huge numbers of people being banned. Now, this resulted, and this is kind of funny, but they hold elections, right, for their board members. The openSUSE board consists of a board of 6 people. I used to sit on it myself many, many years back. 6 people. And, they regularly hold elections for 3 members at a time, right? Every year they hold another round of elections for half of the board. 3 members get elected every year. So every 2 years they can have a full refresh of the board of directors. Pretty simple. It's maybe a little too often they have elections, but pretty simple. Well, the current round of elections came up this last November, and nobody chimed in. Not one person. Nobody was interested in running to become a member of their board of directors. Nobody at all. They had 3 seats they had to fill. They had 0 people running. And so they extended it. They said, okay, well, this isn't great, so let's extend it. Let's kick it down the line. And they kicked it down the line, and they spent the whole month of December begging people to run. Please, somebody, for the love of God, run for the board of directors for openSUSE. And as time went on, no one was doing it, and they found no one. Come January 6th of this year, they found absolutely nobody. They at this point, they'd extended the openSUSE board of directors elections twice because nobody wanted to run. A combination of things here. One, there was not enough people because they've banned so many conservatives. There aren't actual productive people ready to run and actually govern openSUSE anymore. And 2, people were afraid. People were afraid that if they signed up to run, that they'd get attacked just like everyone else that got attacked and kicked out in various woke purges that openSUSE had conducted over the last, year or 2. So no one was running. In fact, I heard from one source inside SUSE Corporation that they were looking at making drastic sweeping changes to the makeup of openSUSE in order to kind of fix this problem. So as it currently stands, half of the board, 3 people, can be from SUSE Corporation, meaning SUSE employees that get paid by SUSE can be on the openSUSE board. 3 of them. 3 of them must be from the community, right? And then SUSE Corporation appoints, it's not an elected position, a director, right? The board director is an appointed role. I believe it's currently one of the vice presidents of SUSE Corporation. But someone very high up, very, very high up within SUSE was toying around with the idea of let's do away with the whole community aspect of openSUSE entirely and make all 6 people on the board of directors SUSE employees, and don't do an elections, just have them appointed by the CEO and vice presidents of SUSE. That was considered. They're like, if we don't get people in there in the next couple of days, volunteering, we're just going to go ahead and do that. That's what I'm hearing. That resulted in just enough people. So they're going to go ahead and they're going to have an election now. It took a long time to get it going, but they're going to have an election. It's not going to be a competitive election because it's either 3 or 4 people running for 3 seats. So, it's kind of a formality, but technically there's a quote unquote election happening, but they have managed it. But so that's what's happened with openSUSE over the last year or 2 is they've gotten to a point where they can barely function as a distribution. I mean, here's the Google search trends, just to give you an idea of what's happening with them. And again, it's been pretty flat, but if you really look at it, it's slowly going down. The interest in openSUSE is not bottoming out. It's slowly going down over time. And here's what's really interesting. If you correlate the peaks in this chart, they correlate exactly with stories published by the Lunduke Journal. I'm just saying, and I can find no other correlation. One of the peaks, there's another release and announcement they did correlation, but the rest of them, those are all Lunduke Journal stories. All the major peaks on this graph over the last year, and this kind of extends to the previous year as well, are Lunduke Journal stories. So interest in openSUSE appears to be mostly rubbernecking, like, oh, look at that accident that we're driving by, from the Lunduke Journal, which causes a peak in the interest, and then it drops down a little bit lower than before. And slowly over time, the baseline is dropping 5 points, 10 points down, month on month, significantly over the last year. And will that continue? I don't know. But openSUSE has been having a hard time getting anyone to even run for their board of directors. So, and there just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interest in it. Now, what's interesting is me doing this story will probably cause, when you go back and look at it, a small spike in the openSUSE search trends. That's just how it goes. Every time there's a news story that specifically calls out openSUSE, there's a little spike in it. And but overall, it's going to continue on going down. And these are how it goes. I mean, we look at the difference between that and, say, I don't know, OpenMandriva. Holy heavens. OpenMandriva comes out as non-woke and instantly shoots through the roof, breaks the ceiling, punctures the sky, and sets a whole new definition for what the ceiling is. I mean, it's incredible. Will be interesting to see what other open source projects, Linux distributions, software foundations, and the like look at the data that's slowly rolling in from not just OpenMandriva and openSUSE, but others as well, and make decisions based on that. Because, I mean, realistically, if you're running a project and you want to see it succeed and you look at the data that you've got in front of you, you are going to do anything but go woke. You're not going to start banning people for being conservative. You're going to encourage the conservatives to come to you, because not only are you going to get new people that are going to raise your numbers, you're going to get productive people. You're going to get people who whip out their credit cards to donate financially to your project because they want to be in a software home. They want to contribute to something that they think doesn't hate them, right? And I think that's what we're seeing here. And we're going to be watching this very closely, not just these two, but all the other major Linux distributions and commercial operating systems as well, because I think we're going to see very, very similar changes over time to the systems that are woke versus the systems that are non-woke. There is a distinct business benefit. There is a distinct open project benefit to declaring non-woke. And there is an obvious, measurable, distinct hindrance to declaring that you are woke. That is without a doubt. Without a doubt, I have yet to see any evidence from any project that points in the other direction. That's worth noting it. Go woke, go broke? Well, we have numbers, and the numbers keep rolling in. Thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers who make this all possible. Go to lunduke.com. You can listen to the show, watch the show, read the works, interact with me on a whole bunch of different sites. The podcast feeds, it can be on iTunes and Substack and Locals and Rumble and X and YouTube. And shoot, I'm even on Facebook and Patreon. You can get digital MP4 DRM free downloads of the show, whatever you want. Just go to lunduke.com and there's a whole lot of details there. You can find out how to become a whistleblower there. If you've got a tech project, foundation, or company you work for that's doing something funky, click that link, get a hold of me. Let's shine a light, because sunlight's the best disinfectant. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across this whole gosh darn glorious inner tube of ours, I do declare, end broadcast.